أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وارواح العالمين له الفداء رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So dear brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. A warm welcome to each and every one of you, our dear Hadi family, as well as those who are online listening and those who will later hear the message, inshallah. Brothers and sisters, today we're going to do three things. First and foremost, we want to commemorate the shahada or the martyrdom of our Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Then after that, there are two current events that I'd like to address briefly. And then finally, we'll continue with our lesson, which is Quranic Tawheed. Inshallah, we'll be going over the third take. So the leader has so far had two takes. One of them was Tawheed as a world view, as how we see the reality of the world according to the Quran. The second was Tawheed as an ideology, as a framework for action. And then the third one, which we'll be doing today, is Tawheed as a pact or an accord. You can call it a covenant between Allah and the mu'mineen. So that'll be the third take that inshallah we'll address. But first of all, the Imam, the Shahada of the Imam. Brothers and sisters, we're commemorating the death anniversary of a hero and a champion, Imam al-Baqir. But unfortunately, he's an Imam who was, by many of his contemporaries, misunderstood and underappreciated. Even by many of the Shia now, 1400 years later, we see that this Imam isn't appreciated the way that he should, isn't known the way that he should, and misunderstood, unfortunately, by many. But inshallah, before I give the historical examples, then I'd like to start off with reminding us, all of us, myself first, about the spiritual status of this Imam. How important was he to God? So then maybe, inshallah, if we understand how important he is, we can appreciate a little bit more what he's done for us. And inshallah, implement or take him as a practical example. So I'd like to start, brothers and sisters, with a story. This story shows us the reward of being one of the Shia of Imam al-Baqir. Maybe if we see the status of the Shia of the Imam, then that might help us to better understand the status of the Imam with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But allow me, brothers and sisters, to start with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So brothers and sisters, the first point is that even a Shia of the Imam has a station with God that we can't understand here in the dunya. Inshallah, we'll understand it in the hereafter. This first story is about a man named Hakam. So Hakam says that it was a gathering. We were sitting there with the Imam. It was a large gathering. He says the house was full of people. Suddenly, when we were sitting there, an old man came in. This old man was so old, he was leaning on a cane. But such a sincere man, such a true Shia, this old man. So he came into the house, stood at the door, and very respectfully addressed the Imam. Assalamu alaikum, Yabna Rasulullah, addressed the Imam. The Imam returned his salams. After that, the Imam turned to the gathering. So his house full of Shia, everybody, it's the time of Imam al-Baqir. The man now turned to the gathering and he passed his salams to the gathering. After he passed his salams to the gathering, the man waited. Everyone returned the salams of the old man, and then the old man begins to talk to the Imam. And he says to the Imam, describing himself, he said that I love whoever you love. I love you and I love whoever you love. And he said, Wallahi, I swear by God, this love that I have for you and for your followers, all those who you love, is not because of the dunya. There's not an interest that I have. He says that I hate your enemies and I take your enemies to be enemies and I distance myself from them. While again, I have no personal problem with those individuals. He said, I consider everything you declare to be halal, halal. Anything you consider haram or forbidden, I also consider that forbidden. He said, my question to you is this. Is there any hope for me? Will maybe Allah have mercy on me? So when the Imam sees this, the Imam tells the old man, he says, come here. Come right over here. The old man walks until now he's sitting down with the Imam. And then the Imam says this, a man asked this exact same question from my father, Imam Sajjad. And my father explained the following to him. If you die with this belief, he says, when you go into the akhirah, you will meet Rasulullah. You will see Ali. You will see Hassan. You will see Hussein. And you will see me, Imam Sajjad. And we will be the light of your eyes. We will be the light of your eyes. He said, when you die, then the angels will come to greet you with rawh and rayhan, that ease, those wonderful flowers. The angels will come to greet you on that day. The old man, so sincere, when he heard these words of the Imam, he was so overwhelmed. He asked the Imam, please tell me again, repeat yourself. The Imam repeated himself. The old man then, now he himself, he couldn't contain himself anymore. He said, if I die like this, on this state, I will meet Prophet Muhammad, Amirul Mu'mineen, Hassan, Hussein, Imam Sajjad, and they will be the light of my eyes. The angels will come to greet me. The old man couldn't take it and he burst into tears. But they said the man was sobbing. He was wailing, head down. And the Imam al-Baqir now, took his blessed hand and he wiped the tears off of the face of the old man. The old man raised his head. He's now looking at the Imam. And he asked the Imam a question. He said, would you give me your hand? The Imam gives him his hand. The old man took the hand of the Imam and he rubbed it over his face and his eyes. After that, the old man stood up. He opened his shirt. He rubbed the blessed hand of the Imam over his chest, over his body. So happy, so incredibly overwhelmed. The man took permission from the Imam. He got up and he left. When the man left, the Imam just stood and watched him walk away. Then he told us, if anyone wants to see one of the inhabitants of paradise, then you look at that old man. So brothers and sisters, this lets us know the status of even the Shia of the Imam, let alone the Imam himself. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. hopefully we become Shia of the Imam. Now, the thing is that why is it that the Imam was misunderstood and underappreciated, not only by his contemporaries, but even some of us as Shia 1400 years later? This other man who I'm talking about, his name is also Hakam, a different Hakam. So Hakam says that I went to Medina. You see, some people fail to see the Ahlul Bayt as all one nur, all pursuing one goal, all the same champion. They don't see it. This Imam, he does a lot of the heavy lifting, the quiet infrastructural work. So for this reason, many people don't appreciate him. So Hakam says that I was in Medina and I told the Imam, he had a question for the Imam. He said, are you the Qa'im of Ali Muhammad? And the Imam said, we are all Qa'im with the command of Allah. But Hakam wasn't convinced. Hakam said, but are you the Mahdi? Do you guide? And the Imam addressed him, he said, we all guide to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The man still isn't convinced. He said, but are you Sahib al-Sayf? Are you the possessor of the sword? Not understanding the position of the Imam, they're all one nur, all one. The Imam said, we are all Sahib al-Sayf. But what happens is, the work that the Imam did, that wasn't understood by many. I want to give you an example. Then after that, we'll see, inshallah, current times. Actually, today's lesson, brothers and sisters, is going to be taking a page from the book of the Imam. We're going to talk about his contributions. We're going to take a page from his book. And then we'll see how it applies now. Right? But what did this Imam do for us? So what happens is this, brothers and sisters. Islam as is, true Islam, presents a threat for the Tawaghit. True Islam presents a threat for the Tawaghit. The Tawaghit are forced to, in order to continue their rule, to misrepresent Islam and to teach Islam so that it puts people to sleep. The Tawaghit would love to erase Islam. That would be ideal. They would love to get rid of Islam. But you can't just get rid of Islam, so they have to force feed people wrong Islam. They have to repress Islam and those who are promoting true Islam. Now, what did the Imam do though? What happens is, the Imam realized that unless the mindset and understanding of the masses changes, unless that's different, then even if you remove the Taghut, and every Imam would be struggling to remove the Taghut, but even if you remove the Taghut, but the mindset of the people hasn't changed, their understanding of Islam, because they've been fed misinformation for years now, if this doesn't change, even if you remove that Taghut, eventually another Taghut will take his place. This is very important. The wrong Aqidah is a breeding ground for Tawaghit. When people have the wrong Aqidah, the wrong take on Islam, that's a breeding ground for, example. There's some people, alhamdulillah, we don't have mosquitoes in our backyard this year. We don't have mosquitoes. We don't, alhamdulillah. Okay? But mosquitoes, brothers and sisters, breed in shallow, still water. They lay eggs in shallow, still water. Some people would get themselves some spray and they would kill the mosquitoes. But if you don't take care of the water, more mosquitoes will come back. A wise person, an intelligent person, wouldn't only concern themselves with getting rid of the mosquitoes, they would drain the swamp. They would get rid of the grounds that are producing So that's what this Imam is doing. The Aqidah, the true Aqidah of Islam, the Imam is going over to do that. Now, I said the masses, many of us, might not know what a jihad the Imam did for us. We might not appreciate. We might have a very simplistic understanding of this champion. We might not even be able to give a coherent example to others of what the Imam did. But the Tawaghit understood the quiet infrastructural work of the Imam very well. That's why the Imam was poisoned, but not openly. They were afraid of the Imam. They brought the Imam, they summoned the Imam to the authorities because they recognized who they were dealing with, this champion that they were dealing with. The Tawaghit understood. We people, we may not have understood. Now the problem is this. The Islamic Aqidah can be taught in such a way that it puts people to sleep. You can teach life-changing. We're going to give some examples because the leader mentions this in the book. The example that the leader mentions in the book is Tawheed. But brothers and sisters, the lesson that the leader is taking is not limited to Tawheed. I'm hoping, brothers and sisters, by the way, that you guys are reading the book as well. Not just limiting yourselves to what's discussed over here. There's a lot of points that are being covered by the leader over in the book that are necessary, and we're going to get more out of the discussions the more we put into it. But Islamic concepts, liberating concepts, concepts like Tawheed, like Nubuwwah, like Imama, like Qiyamah, can be taught in such a way that they put us to sleep. They don't connect the dots. They don't get us to see the big picture and the mission and the cause. There's a way of doing it. I'm going to give you an example of what Imam al-Baqir did. Why they would consider the Imam so dangerous. We'll give you that example. But the reality is that it can be taught in such a way that it puts people to sleep. And the sad thing about it is that even though it's right in front of somebody's face, somebody can see this and not connect the dots. I'm going to give you the example of Imam al-Baqir. But the idea is that somebody can be teaching or learning these concepts, not see the connection between the cause. The Tawheed as taught by Imam al-Baqir is going to be something that leads to you taking a stance. Spirituality as taught by Imam al-Baqir is going to lead to you standing up against the Tawaghit. But someone can teach it in such a way that it is separate from these. It's compartmentalized. People can put Allah in a box when they teach Islam. Example now. So, the example of Imam al-Baqir is this. Salawat, please. Tawheed as taught by Imam al-Baqir. Tawheed is taught by Imam al-Baqir. What is the connection? What's the methodology? What's the connection between Wilayah and Tawheed according to Imam al-Baqir? Why would a concept like Tawheed lead to a stance? What is the focus normally that other people have when they're teaching Tawheed? When they're teaching Aqa'id, when they're teaching Ahkam? Just think about it. The focus normally is on teaching these things many times in such a way that there is no connection with the big picture and the cause. The opposite of Imam al-Baqir. Example from Imam al-Baqir. Imam al-Baqir, now brothers and sisters, is quoting a hadith which is hadith Qudsi. He's narrating on behalf of God himself. He says this, قال الله عز وجل. So the Imam teaching us. He says, Allah says, عز وجل, لأعذبن كل رعية في الإسلام. Definitely, 100%, لأعذبن, I will chastise, I will do adhab of every ummah, Muslimin, mu'mineen. I will do adhab of every ummah, كل رعية في الإسلام, who do what? أطاعت إماما جائرا ليس من الله عز وجل. If they obey an imam who is not from Allah Azza wa Jal. And then the imam says something. He says, وَإِنْ كَانَتَ الرَّعِيَّ فِي أَعْمَالِهَا بَرَّةً تَقِيَّةً. Even if in the personal actions of the ummah, they're very righteous, very muttaqi, lots of taqwa, very kind, bir, taqwa, they do all of those things. How many people see the opposite of how it's taught? That the way that it's taught is focusing on the smaller actions, right? I want to help somebody, I want to do tarbiyah. I'm going to do it in such a way, immediately my focus is on what? Not on the connecting the dots, it's big picture. I'm going to teach you ahkam. I'll teach you aqa'id. I'll teach you akhlaq. But in such a way, I don't connect the big picture. The opposite of Imam al-Baqir. What Imam al-Baqir says is that if you teach this way, even if in your personal a'mal, your personal life, you're very righteous, very holy, there is change. But tawheed for you means in my personal life. It doesn't lead to a stance. This one, the Imam says, will lead to God saying, I'll do adhab. The opposite, the Imam continues. What about if the focus in tawheed itself is big picture Islam? The Imam says this. Again, speaking from God on behalf of Allah. وَلَا أُعْفُوَنَّ عَنْ كُلِّ رَعِيَّةٍ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. 100%, definitely, I will forgive, I will pardon, I will overlook every ummah, every group of Muslimin, أَطَاعَتْ إِمَامًا هَادِيًا مِّنَ اللَّهِ, that obey an imam who's a guide from Allah, divine leadership, wali of the time. Even if that ummah, the focus of that ummah, they still had personal problems and issues. The Imam says, he says, وَإِنْ كَانَتِ الرَّعِيَّةِ فِي أَعْمَالِهَا ظَالِمَةً مُسِيئَةً. Maybe there's still some personal issues that these people are working on, but they got the major one right. They connected the dots. So tawheed, wilaya, according to Imam al-Baqir, means I can't be obeying any zalim leader now. That's the focus, the opposite of how people are teaching. So it's just important for us to be able to see the flaws in the argument, to see what the Imam is doing. If it's okay, I want to tell you guys a story that's not true, inshallah. Sometimes people don't see the connection. Once they say two snakes were hanging out. It's not true, inshallah. Two snakes were hanging out. And then one of the snakes turned to the other snake and he said, are we poisonous? And the first snake turned to the other guy. He said, well, I don't know. I hope not. The second snake said, I hope not. He said, why are you so curious though? He said, because I just bit my tongue. Sometimes somebody's teaching Islam the opposite of Imam al-Baqir and thinking that they're doing a good job. The ayat of Quran is very serious, brothers and sisters. This is now Surah 18 and verse number 103. God says this, هَلْ نُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِالْأَخْسَرِينَ أَعْمَالًا. Shall we not inform you of those who they're the biggest losers when it comes to works, a'mal. الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Those whose actions are lost in the life of this world. وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُسْعِنُونَ الصُّنْعَ. They think they're doing a great job. But the tawheed that I'm teaching, the wilayah that I'm teaching, doesn't connect with any of these dots. Why is that the case, by the way? Why would God, a merciful God, a kind God, be so stern? These people, their personal lives are very good. Akhlaq, taqwa, self-building. Why would God be so stern with them? Brothers and sisters, and remember, we're talking about a very kind God, a very loving God, a God who says in the Quran, if I dealt with people with justice, I would wipe out every creature on the back of the earth. God lets a lot of things slide, but this same God who's Rahman and Rahim when it comes to shirk, what does God say? God says in the Quran, this is Surah 4 and verse number 48. Inna Allah, truly Allah, la yaghfiru an yushraka bih. God doesn't forgive anyone associating partners with him. Wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. He forgives other than this to whoever he pleases. Brothers and sisters, what we're going to cover the ayat of the Quran. Why was Imam al-Baqir scorched earth when it came to Tawheed? Why did he quote Allah? Right? Because it's shirk that we're talking about. We'll see the ayat of the Quran. We're going to take a page out of the book of the Imam. Right? Hopefully we'll be able to come to this conclusion afterwards, though, about the idea of a stance and how important that is. Right? Following the wali of the time. Hopefully we'll see that from the ayat of the Quran. But before I do that, I'd like to mention something about current events. So brothers and sisters, you, me, we've all seen that on June 18th, a submarine went down. And there was global coverage. The media was covering it. It was a multinational effort to rescue those individuals. Unfortunately, we learned that it was a catastrophic event, and they died. And I'm sure for their families, that was very sad, very tragic, right? Our thoughts are with them. I want to mention something else, though. Brothers and sisters, from June 18th, what has been happening in Palestine? The same period of time. How many Palestinians have been murdered in this same time, including women and children? I'm talking about the ones who became shuhada, who already went back to Allah. Isn't it twice the number so far? We're not talking about those who are critically ill. How many masajid burned? How many houses? Because you've seen this, right? We're all watching this, where the Israeli military goes in. After the military goes in, helicopters, we're talking about places where people live. You and I mean, we're living in a, helicopters fly in. Military personnel, special forces. They sent in hundreds of armed settlers with masks, with weapons, shooting at people. Right? Where is the outcry? If it's that 5 people, human life, that's sacred. Now, why did I mention this, though? Brothers and sisters, there's something that you and I don't want to forget. Sometimes, when we believers or other human beings are treated as second-class citizens, it also settles in the minds of the people. That's what is really sad. When the mustad'afin, when the oppressed, they also don't care. They also aren't fazed. On June, was it 13th or 14th? 700 people in a boat. Outcry. So again, for us, do we, watching this savagery, this brutal apartheid regime, no, we're not indifferent. We haven't forgotten. So we affirm the sacred and God-given right of the Palestinians to self-defense. They're also Bani Adam. So that's one. The second one is also important, current events again. And these stances are important. I'll share the hadith, but stances, having a stance, the same way that Imam al-Baqir teaches us, these things are important in the akhirah. It's been 2 months now, brothers and sisters, since the Islamic Center of England has been taken over. Brothers and sisters are praying outside that center. But it's important for those brothers and sisters to continue to resist, to continue to push back. They're fighting for more than they know. all of those centers who haven't stood up for themselves, if these believers stop fighting, everyone's in danger. There are other things that are going to happen if these believers don't push back. So we tell them, you must continue. Allah is with you. We are with you. We haven't forgotten you. And it's important for all of us to reiterate our stances, to share our concerns, not allow this to be something that just gets swept under the rug. If the brothers and sisters fail over there, then Allah has talked about what happens in the sunnah. The divine sunnah is this: Man a'ana dhaliman. Whoever assists a dhalim. Not resisting is assisting the dhalim. Not pushing back is assisting the dhalim. Allah said, or the hadith says, Sallatahullah alayh. God will unleash the dhalim. It can get a lot worse in England. It can become like Sweden, like France. You've seen in the news, they're introducing bills to ban boycotting Israel. If you want to boycott Israeli products. Right? So the resistance right now is absolutely important. And we, of course, we're with them. The hadith, the reason that these stances are important, brothers and sisters, the hadith says this: Man ahabba amala qawmin. Whoever loves the actions of a group of people, ushrika fi amalihim. That person will be made a partner in the thawab of the a'mal of those individuals. So they must push back, and inshallah they will. Now, salawat please. Okay, so we're back to our lesson now, and now we're going to be going over those ayat of the Quran. We saw an example of Imam al-Baqir teaching us what true tawheed is, what wilaya is, him connecting the dots, him making it scary. It wasn't just a concept in the mind. We saw that. We've learned that so far, it is part of our worldview, how we see the world, the reality of the world. We also learned that it's an ideology. But today is our third take, where we examine tawheed as a pact, a covenant you can call it, that Allah has taken from mu'mineen. Now, we're going to ask ourselves a question going in. If we have embraced that tawheed is a worldview and how we see this world, it's also an ideology, but a pact now, the question is this: to what extent does tawheed affect the life of a believer, a muwahid? We're going to ask the Quran now. Is it just in my beliefs, which we covered? Is it just in my actions? Let's say that a muwahid, someone who believes in the oneness of Allah, this person must definitely, for instance, make tayammum if they don't have wudu, make salah, face the qibla when they are slaughtering an animal. Or is tawheed much more widespread, affects every area of our lives? Now, brothers and sisters, as you've noticed in the ayat of the Quran, there is no subject covered as intensively as tawheed. As far as the number of ayat, as far as God's tone when he talks about tawheed, there is no other subject, not even nubuwwah, that is covered in this way in the Quran. The reality is that we're going to have 6 takes, inshallah. After this third take, we'll have 3 more. That doesn't mean we've covered all of the areas of tawheed. That's on us now to go over and examine the Quran. What lessons is God teaching us about this all-important subject that covers more ayat than any other in the Quran? Okay, but we're examining now as a pact. If we were going to examine it as a treaty, as a pact, then we would say the first article of tawheed is that no one and no thing is to be worshipped or obeyed other than Allah. That's God's covenant. Now, brothers and sisters, I want us to start looking at some ayat of the Quran. We'll look at them together. And inshallah, we will look at them and then we'll kind of get these principles from them. The first ayat of the Quran. So now, brothers and sisters, we're looking at the ayat of Tawheed. We'll look at them together to see what we get from the ayat of the Quran. So, brothers and sisters, can you turn to surah number 36 and verse number 60? 36, 60. And let's see if I'm quoting this correctly. I'm going to read it and you guys tell me if I've got it right. Do you guys have this? Alam a'had ilaykum ya bani Adam? Okay. So now let's read the Arabic together and see what it is God's telling us. So God starts off with a question. God teaches us through questions in the Quran. Well, I don't know if we'll be able to cover that approach of God today. Anyhow, God starts off with a question. God says, when he says that's a question. Alam ahad ilaykum. Didn't I take a covenant from you? An ahad. Didn't I take a covenant from you? Ya bani Adam. O children of Adam. What was the covenant of God, the pact of Allah with the muwahhideen? Allah ta'budu shaitan, that you not do ubudiyya, abd, you not be an abd, you not do worship of shaitan. But now, two questions. Ibadah in the Quran, from the ayat of the Quran, is not limited to declaring someone as a deity. The message of this verse isn't going to be only that the covenant of God is don't become a devil worshiper. Right? Ibadah, ubudiyya, being an abd, is a lot more extensive. That's one. Also, shaitan is not limited to just being that iblis. So first ayat of Quran. The first one, brothers and sisters, I would like you to turn to Surah 6 and verse number 112. We're expanding or understanding what ibadah is. No, first what shayateen are. When we talk about shayateen. So from the point of view of the Quran, brothers and sisters, shaitan or shayateen is all of the forces of evil that are outside of yourself. You have a nafs, which is a partner with shaitan, which also invites to shaitan, which obeys shaitan. But then we have an outside force, which is also working. But that outside force isn't only iblis. There are human beings who are also shayateen, according to Quran. So we're looking at the verse now. See if I've quoted this one correctly. Surah 6 and verse number 112. Do you guys see this? وَكَذَلِكَ. Do you guys see that? وَكَذَلِكَ. Okay. And in this same way, جَعَلْنَا, we set up لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ, for every nabi, aduwan, an enemy, an adu. God says, shayateen, right? Shaitan, shayateen, he says, al-ins wal-jinn. So shayateen, shaitan isn't just iblis. All of those who are pushing for shar and evil and wickedness are shayateen, according to the Quran. What else from the Quran? The other thing that we're going to learn from the Quran is that obedience to others than Allah and disobedience of the Creator is shirk. Why was the Imam so harsh? Obedience to other than Allah and disobedience of God is shirk, according to Quran. Let's look at another verse of the Quran. Again, Surah 6. And this time, see if you can look at verse number 121. So 6, 121. Let's see if I've quoted this one also correctly. Do you guys see this? Inna shayateen. No? It's not? Some people are shaking their heads. Are you misguiding me? Huh? Is it 6, 121? It's not the beginning of the ayah. Thank you. So you almost got me. Okay. So let's look at the verse. 6, 121. It's not the beginning of the ayah. What does God say? Inna shayateen. Who sees that? Everybody see that? Truly, the shayateen. We already discussed what shayateen are. La yuhuna ila awliyaihim. They do wahi. They communicate ila awliyaihim, to their awliya, to their friends, to their followers. Why? Liyujadilukum. So they might dispute with you. And then God says the kicker. Now if we look at the Arabic, وَإِنْ أَطَعْتُمُوهُمْ. If you obey them, إِنَّكُمْ لَمُشْرِكُونَ. Truly, you are mushrikeen and polytheists. So in Islam, that first verse that we just learned, that first covenant that God took, the idea was, don't worship shaitan, but worship of shaitan. Is it only Iblis? No. All of the shayateen. What else is it besides taking someone as a deity? It's taking someone as someone to be obeyed. That's also shirk. Now, the ayat of the Quran. Brothers and sisters, together we're going to look at some of the ayat of the Quran. These are from Surah Yunus. So that's Surah number 10 and verse number 28 to 32. Surah 10, verses number 28 to 32. The same way that if you remember from the last verses of the Quran, the last time we went over the ayat of Tawheed, we notice that God was talking to human idols, not stone idols, not cows, not the fire that some people worship. Human gods. We learned that last time. If we remember the ayat also, they also explain to us that these individuals are absolutely powerless. We learned that. The third thing, if we remember from the ayat last time, we're going to see the same thing this time, is that the ayat seem to be addressing the followers of those shayateen. Not the Pharaoh himself, the followers. So let's look at these ayat of the Quran. So brothers and sisters, if you can turn to the same verses that I mentioned in Surah Hud, it's talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah. So God says this, وَيَوْمَ نَحْشُرُهُمْ جَمِيعًا. If you guys see it, y'all see that? Okay. The day when we will gather them all, right? وَيَوْمَ, the day, نَحْشُرُهُمْ, we will do hashr of them, جَمِيعًا, all of the khalaiq, everyone will be standing before God in that court on the last day. Then God begins speaking. ثُمَّ نَقُولُ, then we will say, لِلَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا, we will say to those who took partners besides Allah. What will we say? مَكَانَكُمْ أَنْتُمْ وَشُرَكَاءَكُمْ. You and your partners, those who you took as lords besides Allah, stay in your places. Freeze. Don't move. Now, think about it for a second. Would you tell Hubal, a stone idol, don't move? Stay in your place? Or are we talking to an intelligent human being? Stay in your place. Don't move. Hubal, the cow. Okay. So these are human idols. What happens? The human idols also speak. Ayat of Quran. The verse continues. God says, وَقَالَ الشُّرَكَاءُ. Oh, so, no, God, he says, so let me continue with what God said. He says to those who associated partners, مَكَانَكُمْ أَنْتُمْ وَشُرَكَاؤُكُمْ. You and your partners freeze. You stay in your place. فَزَيَّلْنَا بَيْنَهُمْ. Then we will separate between them. And then God says, وَقَالَ شُرَكَاؤُهُمْ. So now, those human idols, now they speak up. Now it's their turn. The Bidens, the Saddams, all of these zalimin, they speak up. قَالَ الشُّرَكَاءُ. So the partners, those who are associated with partners with Allah, they said, مَا كُنْتُمْ إِيَّانَا تَعْبُدُونَ. They're so ungrateful. They say that you weren't worshiping us. The people who follow those secular leaders, they say that the shayat, those idols say, you weren't worshiping us. They continue, they say, فَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ. Allah is sufficient as a witness between us and you. إِن كُنَّا عَنْ عِبَادَتِكُمْ لَغَافِلِينَ. We had no idea. We were ghafil that you were even worshiping us. The people have killed themselves for these shayateen. And the shayateen, we had no idea that Allah is sufficient as a witness. At that stage, see, now, if you notice, brothers and sisters, I said, it seems like the tone is to the followers. At that time, imagine the regret of the followers who did everything for that Taghut. And then to hear the Taghut say, first of all, you shouldn't have been doing worship. I didn't even know you were doing worship. It says then, هُنَالِكَ تَبْلُو كُلَّ نَفْسٍ مَا أَسْلَفَتْ. Everyone will experience what they sent forward. Right? Because on the day of judgment, brothers and sisters, the actions that we took here, the stances that we took here, will take on a corporal form. It's not like God's torturing anybody. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to leave you with one last story from the Imam. So, what did we learn so far? So far, we've learned that Tawheed is a pact. God said, didn't I take this? Wasn't this a promise? Bani Adam, don't worship the shaitan, shayateen, ins wa jinn. Don't do that. On the day of judgment, they'll see they're powerless. They will disassociate themselves from you. Now one story from the Imam. How would the Imam connect the dots between Tawheed and Wilayah? This is now from Imam Sadiq. So Imam Sadiq, a guy named Abu Basir is telling this story. So Abu Basir says that I asked Imam Sadiq, I said, tell me about God. Talk to me about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Will mu'mineen see him Yawm al-Qiyamah? Will they see God on Yawm al-Qiyamah? And then the Imam said, yes, 100%. They will see him. But they've seen God before Yawm al-Qiyamah. So Abu Basir said, but when? And the Imam said, on that time when God took the covenant, he said, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And everybody said, Bala. At that time they saw him. So, okay, interesting. He said, and then the Imam went silent for a moment. And then the Imam said this, the believers have seen God in the dunya. And then the Imam said, don't you see God now? The Imam is a reflection of the attributes of Allah, connecting the dots. This is shirk. If I take, right? We're not saying the Imam is God, but if you see the connection then, obedience of the Imam is Tawheed. Taking someone other than the wali of the time as the wali is shirk. The Imam said, aren't you seeing right now? So inshallah, we hope that Allah help us to embrace full Tawheed. Tawheed is taught by the Ahlul Bayt, and inshallah we become the true soldiers of the Imam of the time. We end with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.